Thank you so much, Maria. Are you in New York? Where are you?
Yeah, I'm in New York right now. I came about 5 days ago and I intend to pass by the center in Fifth Avenue.
Okay, good. So let me know when you're leaving. So maybe you and I can meet. You,
Good, great. I'm leaving on the 1st of January.
wow, that's soon. Time flies, right?
Yes.
See you. I was very pleased to know that you're in New York, so I can reach out and touch you wherever you are.
Me
Are you
too.
staying? Are you staying in Manhattan?
No, in Astoria. My daughter lives here, so I'm in Astoria.
Yeah, Astoria is a very Greek community. So yeah,
Exactly.
you're not too far away from Queens, you know.
Yeah, I may
Hey,
come to Queens. Let's see.
yeah, okay. Maybe you should get in touch with me and you will see how you can get here. But
Yeah,
good
I've been.
morning, good afternoon, good evening to my dear brothers and sisters. And it is such a pleasure to be with all of you today. And hello, Nisha. Nisha is the one who keeps in touch with me, and she kind of sends me these questions, and she kind of stimulates my soul into response. So thank you for doing that. I like it. And I really love the topic for today because I feel it is as we come, now I have to slow down because you said to speak slowly. As we come to the end of the year, we live in a very different world that we started our year with. And so I hope that you are all safe and you are all having that connection with Baba as your companion as you stay in that stage of Sakshi or the detached observer to everything that's happening so rapidly. And when Baba says death and destruction are looking at you in the face, it seems as though the end of 2023 is doing just that to us. But then I was asked to speak on this beautiful topic of the 5 things I have learned from Dadi Janki. And of course, I knew instantly what my 5 things were because the things I learned from her to me were very personal and very specific to me. But they're not things that she wouldn't have said to others. But these 5 things she told me over and over again. It was as if she was instilling the sanskara, these 5 sanskaras in me in such a way that there is no way I could forget them. So that was why I knew instantly what my 5 things were. Now, in opening, I would say that stories were never just stories with Dadi Janki. Each story she tell, and she was a really good storyteller, each story she told held a lesson, it held an example, and it held an insight. And it moved one forward in their spiritual growth. So when we listened to Dadi, and we did that over and over and over again, because one is her general class, but she would call us sporadically during the day, and she would then say things to us. And when we listened to Dadi, we drew from each experience the alertness with which to study and the attention with which to live our lives. So, for instance, when I'm listening to the Murli, there is an alertness that I have because when Dadi was reading the Murli, and she would say, sit in front there and listen to me, I knew that it wasn't just I had to be alert in that I couldn't fall asleep, but there was an intellect alertness. There was a mental and an intellect alertness, but it was also an alertness in my heart. So I engaged with her as she was reading Baba's Murli, and there was an alertness. And even today, as I sit in class and I listen to others, I have that same inner alertness. And the attention was always to listen to the Murli, but look at the Murli as though it's telling me what it is I need to do, how I need to live my life. So I'm putting the 5 lessons within this context, and hopefully I will get through all 5 of them, because I wanted to put the lesson I learned, tell you an example of this lesson, and I'd like to highlight one particular dharana that came from the story that stayed with me, and then a few insights. So I will see how much I can get through, and hopefully I can get through all 5 in a essenceful way. So the first lesson I learned from Dadi is when she would say to me, do you feel my bhavana? So the first lesson is bhavana. And, you know, we're entering the season, we're in the season of Christmas. And there is this Christmas carol, do you feel what I feel? So when she would say, do you feel my bhavana? I would always feel that. Do you feel what I feel? That's what she was asking me. So how did this come about? How did this lesson stay with me? Do you feel my bhavana? And she was at Peace Village, and she took my hand and she said, come for a walk with Dadi. And she walked me around that little pond in Peace Village, because once you took Dadi's hand, it wasn't that you were leading her anywhere. She was leading you. So she took me around this pond. And she asked me the question, so tell Dadi what efforts you're making. And then I started telling her, you know, I kind of spruced up and said, Dadi, I am making the effort on transformation. And I think I really know now what Baba means when he uses the term transformation. And I can transform my thoughts. Really, I've mastered that transformation, that if I'm getting a negative thought, I can stop it in its tracks, and I can redirect my thoughts to create the opposite to those negative, to create the positive. And she listened to me because I was quite very enthusiastic about what I was saying to her, because I thought I got it. And then she said to me that, do you think that transformation at the level of thoughts is complete transformation? And I said, yes. She said, no. That complete transformation is when you transform the way you feel about something, not just the way you think about something, but the way you feel about something. So that was my first experience, because then she turned to me and she said, after she said that, she went into silence for a few minutes, and she said, do you feel my bhavana? And I was like, in the silence, and because it was also new to me, because I never looked at my feelings to transform, So she was opening a deeper level of transformation within me, and I was still reflecting on it. And then she asked this question, do you feel my bhavana? And then from there on, whenever she would ask me that question, I would always go to the level of my heart. And that is how I connected to my heart. Before, I would say the heart is there, I would take the heart for granted. And so the heart for me was the love in the intellect, the love in the soul, that from which these pure feelings emerge into my heart. So the highlight from this lesson was so many of us are here today because of Dadi's bhavana for us. And Dadi would say in her classes that I have bhavana for each and every one of you, but you do not take the time to be silent, because in that silence, it is then you will be able to catch the bhavana I'm sending to you. So that was the highlight of that experience. And then some of the insights, and this is things I would remember that she said over a period of time in her classes, and how I would use this bhavana in service to others. And she said to me once, and this, I will give you just one highlight, just one insight from this highlight. She said to me, I asked her, so Dadi, bhavana are pure feelings. And then she said, but you have to have bhavana for someone. And what does that mean? And what is the effort required for that? And she says, actually, bhavana is also good wishes. And she says that good wishes are as important as pure feelings, because it is the combination of the good wishes with the pure feelings that makes bhavana strong. And she says that when you have these good wishes and pure feelings, she says, then you're able to have bhavana for Baba. And I said to her, Dadi, how do you have bhavana for Baba? She says, my bhavana for Baba is that I am able to catch vibrations that Baba is giving to the world through me. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is the highest form of bhavana. And to know that you can also take bhavana from Baba. Baba also gives us bhavana. Bhavana is not just what the souls are giving to one another, but to catch Baba's vibrations, his bhavana for us. And she says that when the soul accepts something from Baba with bhavana, the soul is then able to receive the power from Baba. And then she says, the one thing that stands in the way of our bhavana, whether it's bhavana from Baba or whether it's bhavana to others and from others, is our nature. So that was something she said to me, you need to look at. Do not ever let your nature get in the way of your bhavana. So that was lesson number 1. Lesson number 2 was on respect and regard. For Dadi, respect and regard was very, very important. And so the story of how I learned respect and regard from Dadi was actually a story that I call crossing the line. And I crossed the line with her. And this story that I'm going to tell happened many, many years ago. And there was a situation in Madhuban. And the situation was actually something that was upsetting the brothers in Gyansarovar. And Dadi was in Shantivan, and she called us all in the evening to come for her night class. And I went with a number of others, and we were sitting in her cottage, Shakti Bhavan, in that front room. And we were listening to her. And then I said to her, I said, Dadi, the brothers in Gyansarovar are upset. And why don't you go up and meet with them personally? So then she said, she says, it's not the right time for me to do that. And of course, I was like on this course of trying to convince her to do something. And I was using my own logic, which was, of course, limited logic, to tell her all the reasons that she should be going up to them, telling her that she's like a grandmother, and to withhold her presence from them might be something that is not going to be good in the long term. And all this logic I was talking to her about. And then the others were listening. And Dadi was like looking at me, because what I was doing was I was challenging her in this group. And then she turned to me and she said, do you feel my love? And I said, Dadi, what does this have to do with what I'm telling you? What does your love for me have got to do with what I'm telling you that you should be doing in this moment? And then she says, but I'm asking you a question. Do you feel my love? And I felt I didn't have to respond. But then others responded instantly, because they were observing. And of course, they were seeing the dynamic that I was building in this room. And of course, they wanted to stop it. So they jumped in and said, Dadi, I feel your love for me. I feel your care for me. And I feel, but then she came back to me and she said, do you, Gayatri, feel Dadi's love for you? And I said, I will feel your love for me, Dadi, when you go up to meet those brothers. And instantly she said, okay, let's say goodnight to Baba and let's remember Baba. And she dismissed us. She dismissed the whole meeting. And we did it. And I remember walking out of her cottage suddenly, totally deflated. And I said to myself, gosh, I've crossed the line with Dadi. I challenged her in public. I was asking her to do something that she was telling me she's not going to do. And all of this was happening. And so I crossed the line. The next day, we all know that she gives almonds, right? You go to say good morning to her and she gave you almonds. So I didn't go to say good morning to her because I was too ashamed of myself of what I did the night before. So I didn't go. So then she sent to call me. And this was my biggest understanding and experience of respect and regard. And she said to me, when I went, she gave me the almonds, she gave me drishti. And then she said to me, she said, do you know why I am not going up to meet the brothers in Gyansarovar? And at this point, of course, I'm mellow. I'm receiving, I'm listening. I'm not putting a case in front of her. I'm not a lawyer then. I'm a student and I want to listen because I realize my mistake. And she says it's because they are not ready to listen to me. And I don't want to put them in a situation in which, because they're not listening to what I have to say, they may say something to me that they may regret. And I don't want for them to compromise on their own self-respect. But she said, secondly, what I want to say to you is that you are a soul who will not do anything unless you understand it. And she says, and understanding is very good, because once you understand it, you will take it to its completion and you won't stop. But she said, there are many levels to understanding. And the many levels to understanding is not just understanding on the basis of the intellect, the sequence of events, the logic that follows, but it's also understanding the feelings, the love that Dadi has in her heart for each and every soul. And Dadi's decisions are always made on the basis of that love. So she says, now you must include love in your logic of understanding. And that was so profound for me. It was as if in that moment I understood when there is self-respect, self-respect operates on both, well, the integration of both these aspects of love and of logic, of reason and of love. But then when I am in that self-respect, then I will have regard for others. So I would have had regard for what Dadi's decision was and not hammer her for having taken a decision that I didn't agree with, because that wasn't regard. And of course, I wasn't in my self-respect. And then secondly, it's that she, because of her love and because of her deep understanding of Gyan, was upholding, she was regarding those brothers and was upholding it. And that was a lesson in which I felt I learned respect and regard at one of the lowest points in which I crossed the line with her. But then she took that whole experience and she turned it around in such a way that her love and respect for me put me in a place where the realization of what I did happened. And when I was able to turn that whole thing around, because one of my greatest fear when I said I crossed the line was losing Dadi's friendship. And I didn't want to lose her friendship. But it was such a big lesson. And this whole thing about correction, when there's love in the way you're correcting someone, the love in itself gives the person the power to realize their mistake and to change. And so the highlight that I took from her was when she said to me that whatever I have to say, she said, I will say it in 1 minute, but you have to catch my meaning. And she says, your catching and touching power also have to be accurate. In other words, she says, if these two powers, the touching and catching power, are accurate, then her vibrations will reach me and I will be able to understand where she's coming from at the level of the reason she's using in her decision and at the level of her feelings. So that was my big lesson on respect and regard from Dadi Janki. And then she says, you know, one of the insights that I followed through it was, she says, the difference between respect and regard is that Dadi has respect for all of us without asking for regard in return. But what we give regard to in her respect for us is her purity, is her positivity, and in her genuine love in the interactions with us. And that for me was very, very clear in terms of when I'm checking myself. And of course, there are a lot of insights from these lessons that I could share with you. Each one could be a whole chapter in a book. But then the third lesson that I learned from Dadi is she would say to me, don't think. Gayatri, don't think. You think too much. And of course, I interact with Dadi a lot. I interacted with her because I sit on what is called the RC body, the regional coordinating body, which consists of the regional coordinators and a group of us that are called regional coordinating trustees who help our regional coordinators with issues that are going on in the region. And I happen to be one of them because of the UN. So we would be looking at different issues that would be coming up. And my tendency is when there's an issue, I like to look at it from all sides around, from up and down, from inside out, from every corner, from every eventuality. I need to understand it in its totality. So that means that I'm expanding. The issue may be small, it may be a molehill, but by the time I'm finished looking at it, it becomes like the Himalayas. It becomes so big because I am building it with my thoughts and I'm making it stronger and stronger, the way I am positioning it. And so then one day she came to me and she said, she listened. She would usually come into the RC meeting and then she would listen to us all. And then if it's an issue that I was presenting, then the RCs would say, well, Gayatri is presenting this issue, so maybe she should talk about it. Or if it was Maureen had to do the same thing. So then she would listen to it. Whoever was presenting had to present it to her directly. So she would listen. And then she would go into silence, take us all into silence, and then she would respond. And then in her response this one day, she said to me, first of all, Gayatri, stop thinking. And I went, Dadi, I should stop thinking? She said, yes. So it was like a cold water in my face. And I didn't say anything, but of course I kind of crumbled in and became like a little dove, a little gentle dove inside of me and saying, okay, I'm going to be gentle, but I'm going to be quiet. I'm not going to say anything. But of course I was upset that after putting all that thinking into something, she's going to tell me, don't think. So then I said to her later, I met her and I said, Dadi, why are you telling me to don't think? Thinking is a fundamental human right. And to take away my fundamental human right to think is not something that I really like. So then she said, and I said, well, furthermore, if I don't think, who will think for me? And then she said, I will think for you. And I said, oh my God, Dadi, what if you think something for me that I can't do? Then who will carry the consequence of that karma? Then she says, I will never think something of you that you can't do. But then I didn't say to her, and this is my biggest regret in my lesson of don't think, okay, Dadi, go ahead and think for me. I didn't say that to her. And I always have this regret. I said, what if I had said to her, Dadi, go ahead and think for me? What would my life have been like today? It would have been very different. And so the highlight of this lesson is she said to me once, she says, you know, God has a title. And the title is God is Asochta. And this title of Asochta means that God is beyond thought. And so she says, how do you experience this Asochta, being beyond thought, is when you're in the state of Manmanabhav, which Baba has been telling us over and over and over again to practice. Because when you're in the state of Manmanabhav, the mind and the intellect stop thinking, and the mind and the intellect are connected, and they both are having an experience. And an experience is not just at the level of thinking it through, but the mind and the intellect move into a state of experiencing something rather than just thinking about it. And so with that highlight, I always feel that my highest and most meaningful connection with Baba is I definitely have to use thought to connect to him. But after the connection has happened, can I be in that state of not thinking, but of experiencing? And of course, there are so many insights that thread along this highlight. And the insight is to understand Baba when he says, I am Karan Karavan Har. The moment I connect to Baba as the one who is inspiring and I'm the instrument that he's using to do something, then I have to make sure my thoughts don't get in the way. So I can't have any extra thoughts because I don't know, Baba is operating from a sochta. He isn't thinking what he needs to do. He is just being what he needs to do. And the doing is coming from his being. And he's getting his work done. So, another thing she said about me, about not thinking, is that I have too many questions and I want these questions to be answered. So she said, this is one way to weaken yourself, and you need to become free from questioning. When the questions finish, she said, the mind will become stable and the intellect will become unshakable. And then just don't think, she said, just let it emerge from Baba into you. And so I have been practicing. This actually has helped me tremendously in experimenting in silence and understanding Baba at the level of experiencing Baba rather than just thinking about Baba or thinking about Baba's Gyan. And then the fourth lesson is Judy Rogers and I once did an experiment with her. Well, we weren't doing an experiment with her. We wanted to do this experiment with all the daddies who were still in the body. And of course, the dadas, some of them were still there. So we said, how can we get them to remember the 14 years they were in tapasya in Pakistan? How can we emerge memories from within them? Because we were working on a project called the oral history. We wanted an oral history of the yajna so they could talk about the history of the yajna and then we would document it. While the other daddies were a little bit more open to it. And so what we did, we collected these pictures of the yajna, the old yajna pictures, and the pictures had them in it. So if it was Dadi Janki we were talking to, we would show her the pictures with herself in it. If it was Dadi Gulzar we were talking to, we showed Dadi Gulzar the pictures with her in it. So the others were fine. But when we went to Dadi, she looked at us and she went, take those pictures away. I don't want to see the pictures. So I said, why don't you want to see the pictures? Don't you want to remember? She says, no, I don't want to remember the past. And then she sat us down and she says, look, I want you to connect your intellect to the present. I don't want any memories of the past to be interfering with what Baba wants of us in the present. And she says, what? I said, well, what does Baba want of us in the present? She says, he wants you to give Nij Gyan. And Nij Gyan is, Baba wants us to give the original Gyan. So this lesson for me that she left with me, and by the way, she left the body, right? And then last year, I'm dreaming her for the first time. And she came to me in my dream and she said to me, Gayatri, I told you to give Nij Gyan, and you're not giving Nij Gyan. And I said, okay, Daddy, we will do it. We will do it. She says, you have to do it now. And in my dream, I'm saying to her, well, why do I have to do it now? She says, because you have 3 years to do it in. Now, I don't know what that means, but then that lesson came back to me very strongly. I have to give Nij Gyan. Now, in the conversation with her, we ask her the question, Dadi, if someone were to ask you what Nij Gyan is, what would you say? She says, why do you think I say Om Shanti 3 times? Because in these 3 Om Shantis, there is Nij Gyan. And Nij Gyan is basically who I am, who is mine, and what do I need to do? So that was the highlight of this Nij Gyan. And then she says, all you need to tell people, all you need, and first of all, you have to embody it, because Nij Gyan is, I have to inculcate it. I have to embody it. So she says, when you say, who am I? Actually, you're telling them the whole story about the soul. You're giving them an understanding of the soul. You're giving them an experience that would free them from the body, bodily relations, and as well as the atmosphere of the world. And she says, that's Nij Gyan. The second one, who is mine, she says, you're telling them about the one. And you are explaining to them that he is giving us knowledge through Brahma Baba. That's Nij Gyan. You're explaining to them in a way so that they could know him as he is and what he is and what he does, his 3 divine acts. You are giving the complete picture of God to them just by that question. Om Shanti number 2, who is mine? And then Om Shanti number 3 is, what do I need to do now? So she says, what do you need to do now? You need to understand the secrets of the cycle of time and the drama of 84 births. You need to understand the secret of the repetition of the cycle. You need to understand the seed of the human world tree so that you could understand the connection of all religions to the seed. And she says you need to understand the 3 worlds, but particularly the home, because that's where you're heading now. So in this, and someone captured the conversation and sent it back to me. So you had Gayatri asking the question, Dadi replying. And so this was actually, what I'm remembering is taken directly from what she told me in terms of Nij Gyan. And now in the dream, I'm thinking, now everything I present must have a foundation of what Dadi meant when she spoke by Nij Gyan, these 3 Om Shantis. And then my final lesson was a very beautiful lesson, and that was Dadi had love for the Yagya, Dadi had love for Baba. She would always be talking about Baba. But one of the things that Dadi talked a lot about was the ancestor souls. Dadi had really deep friendship with these ancestor souls. And when she would talk about the ancestor souls, what I felt from her that was a big lesson for me was her love for efforts. Because when she would talk about them, even when she would talk about Brahma Baba, she would talk about his efforts and how he made those efforts. And so the highlight for me was her revealing to us the high level of the efforts made by the ancestor souls. And so there was one meeting I was having with her, and we asked her the question, Dadi, what, you love these ancestor souls very much, and you love the efforts they made because you're always talking about it. What were the efforts that these ancestor souls made? And that for me is a lesson I took from her relationship, her deep relationship with the Yagya and with the ancestor souls. And she says these ancestor souls are one, they had love for Sakar Baba. They had love for Brahma Baba. They had love for the Sakar Murlis, because that was where the revelation was. They never had waste thoughts because they never saw weaknesses of others. They just didn't engage with it. They weren't in denial of it. They just didn't engage with it. They kept an accurate chart or journal of their journey of growth. And they had a record of giving regard. She says one of the key things in your effort making, if you want to make efforts like the ancestor souls, is no one should feel from you that they are being disregarded. And so these ancestor souls regarded the seniors, but they also respected the younger ones. Another beautiful thing is that they always kept the attention. She didn't say that they always felt this way, but she said they always kept the attention to make themselves, or to see themselves as worthy, to see themselves the way Baba saw them. And because of that, they didn't feel bad if someone wasn't nice to them, if someone insulted them. They didn't feel bad because that stage of their worthiness, the way Baba saw them, was more important than how other people saw them. And so they remained unshakable and immovable in that. So these are my 5 lessons. And I thought maybe I could write chapters on this. They are so deep, because I realized after I'm sharing with the family in Turkey and all your friends who've joined you today, large brush strokes that Dadi Janki painted on the landscape of my soul. And I said to myself this morning at Amrit Vela, I said, why did she do that? Why, when Yogesh Bhai asked me 5 things that Dadi Janki taught me, or I remember, and I sat and these 5 things came out. And when I'm thinking of them and remembering the stories that prompted them, I felt these were large brush strokes on my soul. And so it's telling me something about me and the role maybe I have to play, because my part, she makes me feel my part is so huge. And so in closing, what I'd like to do is a little tribute to her. And if I were to give a tribute to Dadi with these 5 lessons I just shared with you, I would say that for many of us who knew Dadi well, are left with memories, much like mental reels, film reels, of the experiences she shared with us, of the lessons she taught us, and of that spiritual light of her love that she's left in every pore of our body, every cell of our body being remembered at that level, but also in every single, I don't know what you would call it, light, ray of light in my soul. And so I would say to her, thank you, Dadi, and thank you, family, for giving me this opportunity of sharing with you 5 things I learned from Dadi Janki. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti, dear Gayatri. Wow. I cannot say anything. That was really amazing, amazing. I think all of us now should start thinking about ourselves and see where we are right now.
Mm.
And let's see if Daddy comes to our dreams as well, telling us what to do.
Or
Yeah,
reminding you what you have to do because you're not doing it. But I think that that's a wonderful idea, Maria. I think that at the end of this year, we're all in a reflective mode. And maybe we, those of us, especially those of you who have met with Dadi Janki, even though very little, and if you haven't met with her, what you've heard about her, what are the 5 things that Dadi taught you? What are the 5 things you learned from her? And maybe that will become the frame for us to start our 2024 with.
yes. I think all of us who met her, we didn't meet her as you did, but whatever fortune we have to be with her was really very powerful, and we have to think about what she taught us. Of course, your experiences were really great, and we have to check ourselves, really, we have to check ourselves. And let's see if we have any questions on the chat. Daddy said not to have questions, so I don't see any questions on the chat. So, yes, can you tell us, well, I have some question here, which is, what's the difference between respect and regard?
The difference between respect and regard, she says she always gives us respect, right? But she says the way she gives it is that, first of all, she has respect for all of us. And so if I am in my seat of self-respect, then she says that I don't have to ask others for their regard for me. Because what is respect? Respect is a state of being that I am when I am in soul consciousness. And in this morning's blessing, I think it was, Baba described self-respect very beautifully. So that is self-respect. Regard is when I treat people with respect. From my seat of self-respect, then, when I treat people with that respect, then what they feel from me is my purity, pure intentions, pure thoughts, pure feelings, an uplifting kind of attitude, a positive attitude, and they feel genuine love from me in the interactions. So they then respond to that. And when they respond to it, that is called regard.
Great.
But I can't start off saying, I want regard from them. If they don't feel from me a respect for myself and an extension of that in my interaction with them, why would they have regard for me? And it's the same thing. She always says, many people talk about the yajna, but they don't have regard for the yajna. Another element, since COVID, one of the things I got into the habit of doing is if I'm not reading the Murli, I don't go down to the classroom. I just listen to the Murli on Zoom. And I would choose a spot to listen to the Murli on Zoom. But as I was remembering, and I'm reading some of my notes in terms of what she said to me, she says, regard for the yajna, one of the regard for the yajna is regard for Baba's Murli. I started with that today. And she says, regard for Baba's Murli is to go and sit in the classroom, no matter who is reading the Murli, and listen to the Murli in the classroom. And I had stopped doing that from COVID. And on Monday, I restarted it because I was reading through my notes. And I said that it means I don't have regard for Baba, no matter who he's is reading the Murli, it's not a question of very few in the classroom, but it's a question of the regard for Baba as a teacher. And so I was so moved that I said, yeah, no, this is my commitment now. I have to do this, and I keep the commitment should last, should be sustainable. Yeah. Because there's that laziness that creeps in, and it becomes a new normal, but it's a new normal based on laziness. And we have to make sure that our new normal isn't one big lazy life.
Thank you so much for your honesty and for sharing all these things with us. There is another question here. For how long can you keep the stage of non-thinking?
Well, you cannot keep a stage of non-thinking when you're in action, because obviously you will have to think. But the idea is not to think too much, or not to overthink, or not even to think twice, right? So in order to do that is I stay with the essence. And a very good practice of this is when I'm listening to another, am I thinking? Or am I listening? Because if I'm thinking, I'm having an opinion on what they're saying. If I'm thinking, I may be judgmental. If I'm thinking, I'm looking for a reference in my own life to connect to what they're saying. If I'm thinking, I'm looking for a solution to their problem, which they're not asking me for, but I am. And so I stop thinking. The moment I start doing all of that, I stop thinking. But if I'm in the essence and I'm saying, okay, Baba, I'll be in your remembrance, and I will listen to them from the silence of your remembrance, then there will be thoughts, but there will be thoughts mostly of, this is what they're meaning. What I'm hearing, this is what it's meaning, perhaps. And so there will be very few thoughts. And then you will take those thoughts and maybe replay them for the one speaking to you and say, was that what you meant? But of course, you're going to say to them after they finish speaking, because all they want you to be is a silent microphone to speak to themselves through. So the more silent we are, and the less thoughts we have, the more essential we are, it's the louder the microphone for this person we become, because then they would hear themselves and it would be as if they're speaking to themselves, and we would have no interference of thoughts in between what the speaker and the listener, who is the same person. The microphone is without static, which means my thoughts become the static in the microphone. So that's an example of not thinking and being the essence.